In this video, we look at the construction and fabric of our church buildings and the best ways of looking after them. Over the years, well-intentioned repairs have often used cement on traditional building construction in both renders and mortars, which we now know is not compatible with the construction and fabric of many traditional builds. It's one of the major issues facing some of our churches. We visit Barton Church in Tyrrell, where we get to see the process of replacing lime mortar, and St Oswald's Church in Grasmere, which is undergoing yearly rectification works following a large re-rendering project, as architect Chloe Granger explains.
So St Oswald's is a classic case study, brilliant, because it, as many Lakeland and houses, vernacular buildings, churches, it's built of very impervious slate, and then it was rendered in lime. So because the slate's impervious, the lime then has to work extra hard to pull the moisture out of the structure. St Oswald's was built of slate, would have been rendered or harled and lime washed, but then in the 1890s the Victorians were very keen on stripping off renders to get back to the natural stone, because they thought that the natural stone was more beautiful, and they had this very ill-informed impression that medieval builders would have exposed the stone and that somebody else had covered it up. So the Victorians stripped all the render off and then pointed it in very, very thick strap, pointing very hard. Cement had just come in, was becoming more widely used, and the theory was that the stronger the mortar, the better it was going to be, which obviously, as we now know, is completely the opposite. So they repointed it in cement, but then only 30 years later realised that it leaked like a sieve, so then they ended up having to re-render it again in cement, in pebble dash. So now we've got a building which is totally encased in cement, can't breathe, and is very inflexible as well. So we've got two different things going on: very, very, very thick walls that want to flex with a very, very brittle coating. And this is where we have the issues with the cracking, and then the render starts to fall off. We've got damp walls, moisture coming up from the ground can't escape. So we've got damp inside and cracking, failing render on the outside. So once the render starts to cause a problem and starts to fall off and starts to be dangerous, that's when you sort of need to do something about it.
The re-rendering at St Oswald's is well underway, but despite the best efforts and good work of the specialist contractors, the typical Lake District weather is hampering the progress and the success of the job. David Wiggins is an expert in lime, and Chloe gets some additional advice to see what can be done.
So now we're in a situation where, because there's so much mortar to dry out, we're a year down the line. The mortar is now slowly drying out. The top, it has, however, got saturated, constantly saturated, which has meant that the lime hasn't been able to carbonate properly, but B, we've had washout of the lime, so we're left with a really sandy sort of mix, which has then basically started to flake off the top, and it hasn't properly carbonated, which is sort of expected without having protection over the head. And the outer face, the outer skin has acted sacrificially as it's been drying out.
I think the challenges that you're going to have will be broadly similar. Like working up against the clock towards the winter. Aftercare is always challenging with such. It's not like you've even got anything like a large cope to throw the water away. You've got an inch. An inch
we're
or so
adding
a wee string course there.
We're adding new LED flashings, which is going to help. So for the face of the wall, that's hopefully going to be better protected. But the parapet above, that's going to be more of an issue, because it's not really got the protection that the wall's got. What about saturation in summer, for example? So we're going to be doing this rectification works now, starting next week. So it's going to have a full summer to dry and carbonate. However, it is still going to get rained on. It is still going to get wet. So So we're not going to get hit by the frost, but we are going to have a problem of constant wetting.
Yeah.
So where do we stand there?
hope it doesn't rain so much. You know, it will get wet and it will dry by some degree, but at the end of the day, if you end up with a horror of a summer that's just loading water into the wall, it will struggle to carbonate. It's you know, we can't forecast the long-term weather for here, I'm afraid. So
no, as we can see, it's chucking it down.
The relentless rain may cause problems, but there are always solutions. And as David explains, it's because of past problems that we now have a much better understanding.
It'll sound weird, but I'm quite thankful for the 100 years of abuse of historic buildings with the advent of cement, because up until recently we would never have known why lime mortar worked so well and preserved and looked after buildings for millennia. So we've got an example of lime working well historically, and then cement's come along and ruined it in the last century. We can now look at the two, compare the materials and understand exactly specifically why it is that cement causes the damage it does. So for that I'm thankful. And that informs why lime mortar preserves, and that was essentially my research, was examining, look, why does this one cause the damage? Everybody knows cement's the wrong material for the job, specifically why, and the why is important because it informs the root of the problem.
Because of modern progress and expert intervention, we can now conserve our buildings for longer. Rectification works are now complete at St Oswald's, and the project has even won a prestigious award for its pioneering achievement. At Barton Church in Tyrrell, their cement problem was in the exterior mortar, and as architect James Innerdale explains, as well as a warmer and drier church, there are other important benefits of replacing cement with lime mortar.
One of the other benefits of actually taking the cement mortar out of the building is that the cement mortar was stopping the walls from breathing and evaporating the moisture out of the wall, but it was also causing erosion to the face of the stonework because what moisture there was in the wall was evaporating through the stonework rather than through the joint, and that was causing erosion to the face of the stonework. So repointing in lime means that the evaporation of the moisture occurs through the joint rather than through the stone, and that protects the stone and means that the stone will have a longer life.
But before work begins, there are other important factors to consider.
Conditions are important. Avoiding frost is something that's very important. Also, the work needs to be protected, both particularly after the lime mortar has been put into the wall. It needs to be protected to make sure that it doesn't dry out too quickly. So during the spring and the summer, you're protecting it from the sunshine and warm, drying winds, but at the same time you're also protecting it from rain, and when you get in the early spring and in the autumn, you're protecting it from more sort of colder weather as well. So actually making sure it is well looked after and protected and tended is an important aspect of repointing a building in lime mortar.
And if there is money in the budget, it's always recommended leaving protective scaffolding up for several months following the completion of any large lime rendering project to allow as much carbonation as possible before it's finally exposed to the elements.
It's also important to get the right building contractor when carrying out work on historic buildings, because they will bring their knowledge and experience in the use of traditional building materials when actually carrying out the work. The actual act of carrying out the work using the right materials is just as important as the specification and actually understanding the building, and hopefully they will also come with a degree of sympathy for historic buildings and appreciation of historic buildings as well.
With the help of their architects, both churches have found contractors who specialise in lime. And at Barton Church in Tyrrell, Chris Morfitt from Lakeland Lime takes us through the lengthy process of replacing cement with lime mortar.
Just break it vertically all the way up the joint.
Yeah.
the danger on this, with the mortar being so tight and also being so hard, it tends to pull the face off the stone. So we've got to go carefully, trying to break the mortar in small pieces rather than pulling at the mortar where it damages the face of the stone. It also holds moisture in because it's not permeable, so once the moisture's in there, it can't breathe out through the joint. So you'll find once you've chipped back there, you'll hit lime, which it was originally constructed with. So we've got good clean joints for repointing. An elevation like this would take us by hand as well with a team, something round about 4 days, something like that, just to go carefully, especially we've got details like the windows and things, so we've got to be careful there, and obviously protection of people's gravestones as well, memorials. Once that's done and cleared out, we then let the wall breathe, so it can be a number of months depending on the core size of the wall. So we would have a scaffolding up and some protection to stop the driving rain, but it's allowing it to air out, and then that way we can then start pointing again with the lime, and that also needs a number of weeks to carbonate. So the full course of the works could be over a couple of months, and that just allows it to dry properly. We don't want to rush it unless it won't set. Well, here on the edge of the lakes here, and Ullswater just being across, we get caught out with winds and rain, so we need to protect against that. We do that with the sheeting or the hessian, and we also can't stand the sun too much, so we need to protect from that. But we've seemed to manage here. We're out of the wind here, so that's it. So we start first with the sand going in. We've got 2 types of sand. It's graded slightly different. This one's a local one from up at Dalston. It's Carger Myers, and then this is a Nosterfield, so it's from Yorkshire. We're using it for the benefits of for the colour and also for the set of the mortar. So we've pre-graded these out for this mix, and this is the quicklime. So what will happen now is, now the quicklime initially come into contact with the moisture of the sand will start a reaction, but when we come to add the water, that's when the reaction will start and the mortar will form, and it'll actually heat up to over 100 degrees. So now Johnny will start pouring the water in, and you'll start to see the heat starting to rise from the mix as the quicklime starts to react. It's good to go steady with the water in stages rather than all at once, because there is a chance that you could drown the mix and you would put far too much water in, which would cancel out the reaction. This is what we call a hot mix lime as well, so it's what we believe that these places were built with. There would be a heap of sand, the quicklime would have been added, and sometimes they would have just covered that like a large molehill, for instance, and come back in the morning and kept turning it. As you can see, it's started to form the mortar. It's heated up now to touch, and this is prime time really that we would release that. We carry it over to the wall and we can crack on with pointing, because we're going to get that expansion from the mortar that will fill the joint so well.
Willow the terrier might not be interested in the outcome, but conservation architect James Innerdale will closely monitor the progress.
How are you doing?
All right.
Good.
How's it going?
Good.
What are the joints like? Are they?
They're quite deep.
Right.
That's why we're packing them out with gallets now.
Mm.
It was just really hard cement pointing on the front.
So it's just on the face, but void.
That's it.
Gaps behind.
The usual story.
The usual story. Yeah. Good.
We were just doing an initial packing out, and then once it's had time to carbonate a little, we'll be back to point.
The works are now well underway, but what will the final impact be for Barton Church?
Well, it already has made a difference visually. A lot of people have already commented on how much more attractive the building looks now it's been repointed in lime, but also repointing in lime, it will hopefully enable the walls to dry out, which will mean that the walls will be drier and it will feel drier and actually potentially warmer inside the church as well.
On completion, a church that is protected and preserved for the future, and that will feel drier and warmer for those using it. But that's not the end of the story. Conserving our church buildings is an ongoing issue, and there are some important areas that are absolutely essential to keep on top of.
Maintenance, particularly on churches, is very important. Particularly that the idea of maintenance is the idea of actually stopping water from actually getting into the building, which means looking after rainwater goods, making sure the gutters and the downpipes are working properly, they're not blocked, and that's very important because it does stop water getting into the body of the wall and causing problems with damp.
The best thing that can be done is, any slip slates, essential to get those replaced as quickly as possible. One guy, a roofer with a roofing ladder and proper access can replace, a few slates in a matter of hours. It's not a big job, and that could stop water coming in through the roof, attacking, rafters and causing damp up there, which then can lead to rot. Working downwards, like downpipes, look at the gullies. Where does the water go to? Are the gullies clear? Making sure the water's getting away from the building and making sure that the ground is not wet.
Key advice from the experts that simply keeping water out of and away from the buildings is one of the most important things we can do to protect our churches for future generations. If you'd like more information on general maintenance or any of the other issues in this video, you can visit our website at www.ctfc.org.uk.